Forget the glitter-bombed cards rotting on store shelves next to wilted roses that cost more than a week's groceries. Forget the pastel candy hearts puking out misspelled bullshit like "Be Mine" or "Love You Forever." Long before any of that sugar-coated corporate sludge, there was a man rotting in the damp, shit-stinking bowels of a Roman prison, chains biting into his wrists, the air thick with mildew and despair. His name was Valentine, priest, maybe bishop. The ancient scraps of parchment are too torn and contradictory to say for sure. Some say there were 2 or even 3 different Valentines who met bloody ends around the same time. One a Roman priest, another a bishop from Terni up north. Legends bleed together like wounds that won't close, but the core burns through. A man who stared down an empire and refused to blink. This was Rome under Claudius II Gothicus, called the Goth Slayer for smashing barbarian hordes, but a brutal pragmatist who saw love as a liability. Single men fought fiercer, bled cleaner, died without hesitation. Wives, kids, homes, they were anchors, distractions, weak points an enemy could exploit. So Claudius banned marriages outright for young men of military age. No weddings, no engagements, no divided loyalties, just steel, sweat, and the grind of endless war. The empire needed bodies, not families. Valentine called bullshit on the whole decree. In shadowed back rooms, hidden catacombs, or whatever piss-poor hiding spots Christians could scrape together, he performed forbidden Christian weddings. He bound couples in vows the state branded as treason, whispered prayers over trembling hands. Rings slipped onto fingers in the flicker of stolen lamp oil. He wasn't playing matchmaker for poetry's sake. He was running an underground railroad for love itself, smuggling it past the empire's iron gates. Every secret ceremony was a quiet insurrection. Love as rebellion, covenant as middle finger to the throne. Rome smelled the defiance. They hauled him in, dragged through streets that reeked of blood and smoke, past crowds who either spat or looked away. Thrown into a cell where light barely reached, where the only sounds were distant screams and the drip of water on stone. Legend says the jailer, some hard Roman named Asterius, had a daughter blind or deathly ill. The stories shift like shadows. Valentine, even chained, reached out. He prayed over her, touched her eyes or her fevered brow. Sight returned, or strength, or both. The jailer and his household converted in the dark, baptized in secret while guards slept. A miracle born of desperation, not romance, agape love, fierce and unyielding, not the arrow's hallmark sells. But miracles don't buy freedom. Claudius wanted examples. Valentine was hauled before the prefect, maybe even the emperor himself, offered a chance to recant, spit on Christ, bow to the state, live. He refused. The sentence was savage, beaten with clubs until bones cracked, then beheaded outside the Flaminian Gate on February 14th, around 269 or 270 CE. Blood soaked the road. The body was buried nearby, a martyr's grave that pilgrims would later seek. Before the blade fell, though, he scribbled one last note to the jailer's daughter, the girl whose life he'd touched in the gloom. No grand declaration, just gratitude, encouragement, a final human tether. He signed it simply, from your Valentine. No flowers on that grave, no lace, just a smeared scrap of parchment, a priest's blood on Roman stone, and a memory that outlived the empire that tried to crush it. That single line, from your Valentine, would echo down centuries, twisted into something softer, sweeter, safer. But in its origin, it was defiance wrapped in tenderness, a last breath of humanity before the dark. February 15th in ancient Rome wasn't about chocolates or slow dances. It was a full-throttle eruption of life when the city felt half-dead from winter. This was Lupercalia, named for Lupercus or Faunus, the horny goat-legged god of fields, flocks, and raw fucking fertility. No hallmark version. This was the wolf at the throat of civilization. reminding everyone they were still animals under the togas. It all started in the Lupercal, a dank, sacred cave on the Palatine Hill. The very spot where legend said a she-wolf had nursed the abandoned twins Romulus and Remus, Rome's pharaoh founders. The cave reeked of earth, smoke, and old blood. Priests called the Luperci. Young noblemen stripped down to loincloths or nothing at all gathered there at dawn. First came the slaughter. Goats for lust, a dog for purification. Blood sprayed across foreheads in thick red streaks. Then milk-soaked wool wiped it away in a ritual cleansing that left the men laughing, wild-eyed, half-mad with adrenaline and divine possession. The real mayhem kicked off next. They sliced the fresh hides into long, bloody thongs, called februa, the root of our word February, meaning purification through violence. Naked or near naked, smeared with blood and grease, these Luperci bolted from the cave and tore through the streets of Rome like a pack let loose. Crowds parted, cheered, screamed. They chased down women, rich matrons, slaves, virgins, whoever crossed their path, and lashed them with the dripping hides. Like cracks across thighs, arms, bellies, not torture, benediction. Each snap was supposed to drive out sterility, spark fertility, guarantee easy births, make wombs quicken in the coming spring. Women didn't run or hide. They stepped forward, bared skin, willingly, laughing or defiant, offering themselves to the ritual sting. It was sanctioned chaos. The city turned upside down for a day, boundaries blurred, bodies electric. Men howled like wolves. Wine flowed, drums pounded. The air smelled of sweat, blood, smoke, and sex. To the modern eye, it's barbaric, misogynistic, weird as hell. To ancient Romans, it was renewal at its rawest, life kicking back against the cold, the dark, the grave. Mid-February was the hinge. Days lengthening just enough to notice, ground thawing, sap stirring under dead bark. The festival screamed that winter isn't the end. It's the pause before the brutal, insistent pulse of spring. Bodies remembered what calendars forget. We are meat and instinct wired to fuck birth survive. Lupercalia wasn't polite religion. It was primal therapy for a city built on conquest and control. It let the wolf out of the cage for one wild afternoon. Let the old gods remind the empire that beneath marble and legions, Rome was still founded by suckling pups and a she-wolf's milk. The running, the whipping, the laughter, it was all a roar against death, a demand that life keep clawing forward. No wonder the church later eyed February with suspicion. You can't just overlay a martyr on top of that kind of feral energy and expect it to stay quiet. By the late 5th century, Christianity had clawed its way to dominance in Rome, but the old pagan blood still pulsed under the skin. Festivals didn't vanish when emperors converted. They festered in the streets, whispered in homes, clung to habits like smoke after a fire. Lupercalia, that naked, whip-cracking frenzy of fertility and renewal, had survived centuries of Christian rule. It ran on February 15th, but its energy leaked into the days around it. Mid-February was still the season when bodies remembered spring was coming, when winter's grip cracked and life demanded to surge back. Pope Gelasius I, sharp, uncompromising African-born, the first to call himself Vicar of Christ, had zero patience for holdouts. Around 494 to 496 CE, a plague hit Campania. Some senators, led by a guy named Andromachus, blamed the Christians for banning the old rites. They demanded Lupercalia's return. Bring back the blood, the runs, the thongs, purify the city, ward off disease the ancient way. Gelasius fired back in a blistering letter, tearing into their arguments. He called the festival superstition, not salvation, pagan rot that no true believer should touch. He banned it outright, no compromise. The wolf rite was done. No more naked nobles streaking through Rome, no more hides snapping on women's skin in the name of fertility. But here's the rub. Did Gelasius slam a new Christian holiday right on top of it? Popular lore screams yes. He supposedly planted St. Valentine's Day on February 14th to overwrite the 15th, sanitizing the wolf into a martyr, turning pagan lust into chaste devotion. Scholars now mostly call bullshit on that clean swab. No surviving document from Gelasius says, replace Lupercalia with Valentine. The link is a later invention, 18th and 19th century romantics and historians trying to explain why romance bloomed around a date so close to the old fertility riot. The Gelasian Sacramentary, a later liturgical book wrongly tied directly to him, lists a commemoration for Valentine on February 14th, but that's not proof he invented it. The martyr's feast date was already floating in early calendars. Gelasius may have formalized or spotlighted it amid his purge of pagan holdovers, but he wasn't playing calendar Jenga to directly substitute one for the other. Still, the timing is viciously poetic. You have a wild fertility explosion on the 15th. You have a priest martyr tied to forbidden unions executed mid-February. Culture doesn't erase, it colonizes. The church didn't need to declare, this is the replacement. It just let the old energy bleed into the new. Pagan bones got draped in Christian cloth. The running youths and goat blood blessings faded, but the mid-February hum of renewal stuck around, reshaped. Love as covenant overpowered love as instinct, at least on the surface. Gelasius wasn't gentle. He was a hardliner fighting schisms, heresies, and imperial meddling while stamping out lingering paganism at home. Banning Lupercalia was part of asserting control. No more divided loyalties, no more old gods whispering in the streets. But ghosts don't die easy. The church tamed the wolf by chaining it to a martyr story, without ever fully admitting the beast still prowled the edges of the feast. The result? A layered holiday born in tension. Sacrifice laid over rut. Martyrdom shadowing fertility rites. The calendar became a battlefield where old and new fought for the same days, and neither fully won. The wolf didn't die, it just learned to wear velvet. Centuries after Gelasius tried to chain the old rites, the real explosion of Valentine's Day, as we half know it didn't happen in Rome's ruins. It ignited in the castles and courts of medieval Europe, where knights, troubadours, and poets turned mid-February into a battlefield of longing. This was the age of courtly love, not the sweet mutual romance we sell today, but a codified, often agonizing obsession. A knight or nobleman pledged himself to a lady, usually married, usually unattainable, in total abject service. He wrote fevered poems, endured tournaments in her name, suffered sleepless nights over a single glance or glove. The rules were strict. Desire must burn unconsummated, or at least publicly so. Suffering was proof of purity. The lady was elevated to near-divine status. It was Eros dressed as a gate, raw lust wrapped in chivalry, rebellion against the church's tighter grip on marriage and sex by making love a noble art form. Enter Geoffrey Chaucer, the sharp-eyed London poet, who gave the day its first real literary kick. In his 1380s poem, The Parliament of Fowls, he describes a dream vision on St. Valentine's Day, where all the birds gather to choose their mates under nature's decree. For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl cometh, there to cheese, his make of every kinda, birds, partridges, doves, eagles, falcons, pair up in a noisy assembly, debating love's rules while the dreamer watches. Chaucer didn't invent the association, but he crystallized it. February 14th became the day when nature itself conspires for coupling. Birds, those free, instinctive creatures, pick partners in the thawing late winter light, mirroring human longing just as the ground softens and days stretch longer. Suddenly, the martyr's quiet death was overshadowed by poetic fever. The goat-hide thongs faded into quill pens scratching parchment. Naked runners became troubadours, serenading from below balconies. The primal roar of Lupercalia got refined into sonnets, ballads, and coded glances across crowded halls. Love shifted from field and womb fertility to exquisite torment. size, sleeplessness, impossible devotion. The church tolerated it mostly because it stayed within bounds, ideally chaste, always hierarchical. But peel back the courtly gloss, the old animal pulse never vanished. Beneath the lace and lyrics, bodies still stirred with the same seasonal urge. Mid-February remained a threshold, the hinge where winter cracks and life insists on renewal. Poets just gave it prettier packaging. Hearts instead of blood, verses instead of whips, yearning instead of rutting. By the late Middle Ages, February 14th had hardened into custom. Lovers exchanged handwritten poems, early Valentines, drew lots for partners, celebrated pairing in the dead of winter as if defying the cold. The wolf paced in metaphor now, lurking behind every flowery declaration, every aching glance. Culture had braided the layers tighter. Martyr's sacrifice, pagan fertility, seasonal biology, now laced with medieval romanticism. Valentine's Day wasn't born pure. It was stolen, reshaped, elevated. The bloom wasn't gentle. It was fierce, obsessive, a way for humans to keep choosing each other against empire, church, and death itself. Strip it all down. Valentine's Day isn't a holiday, it's a crime scene. A palimpsest soaked in blood, scratched over with ink, scraped again, rewritten in glitter and greed. Every layer screams contradiction, every rewrite a theft, every heart a scar. At the bottom, Roman stone still wet with a priest's blood. Valentine chained and defiant, scribbling from your Valentine to a girl he touched in the dark. His last act not romance, but raw human refusal to let empire snuff connection. Beaten, beheaded, buried. No flowers, just a martyr's corpse and a note that outlived the axe. Scrape that layer. Goat hides cracking like whips through mid-February streets. Lupercalia's naked runners, blood-smeared and howling, lashing women with februa thongs in a frenzy of fertility and fuck you to winter. Not polite blessing, primal demand. Life insisting on itself when the world feels frozen. The wolf god laughing in the cave where Rome's founders suckled at a she-beast's teat. Sap rising, bodies rutting against death's grip. The church tried to overwrite it. Gelasius banned the rite, called it rot, planted a martyr's feast nearby on the 14th. Not a clean swap. Scholars say the direct link is myth, but the timing cuts like a blade. Sacrifice laid over lust, covenant chained to instinct. The old gods didn't vanish. They got leashed, dressed in vestments, forced to whisper instead of roar. Then the poets stole the pen. Medieval courts turned the day into exquisite torture. Knights pining for untouchable ladies, troubadours bleeding verses, Chaucer dreaming of birds pairing on St. Valentine's Day. Love became art, agonized, hierarchical, publicly chaste even when privately feral. Goat thongs became parchment. Whips became words. The wolf paced behind velvet curtains growling low. And now, corporations slather it in pink plastic, cards, chocolates, overpriced dinners. But beneath the commercial gloss, the layers still bleed through. Mid-February remains the hinge, light clawing longer, earth thawing, bodies remembering they're alive. The season doesn't give a damn about Hallmark. It demands renewal, whether through vows, rut, or quiet rebellion. So, what the hell is Valentine's Day, really? It's a priest's final note signed in shadow before the blade. It's blood on hides snapping in cold Roman air. Fertility demanded at the edge of a thong. It's a church playing power games with ghosts, overlaying martyrdom on pagan pulse without confessing the overlap. It's poets inventing winged longing and mating birds while the ground softens underfoot. It's humans, stubborn, feral, wounded, choosing each other anyway. Against emperors who ban marriage. Against winters that kill. Against death itself. Love isn't pure. Never was. It's covenant laced with chemistry, vow tangled in instinct, tenderness edged with violence. The soft from your Valentine and the wolf snarl just beyond the firelight. Sacrifice and sex, devotion and defiance. all scraped over each other on the same damn page. The day doesn't belong to corporations, cliches, or sanitized sentiment. It belongs to the razor-thin edge between endings and beginnings, to the prison cell where a man wrote one last human thing, to the cave where laughter echoes and winter finally fucking breaks. Listen close. You can still hear it. Chains rattling on stone, hides cracking in the streets, quills scratching fevered promises, and somewhere deeper, the low, insistent growl of something ancient that refuses to die. That's the true Valentine. Not the mascot, the insurgent, the layered heart that beats through every rewrite.